unemployment is pushing probably 17%. If we're talking, and if we removed people, or if we look at people who are considered the working poor, i.e. those people who have jobs but are below the poverty line, as in essence unemployed, or certainly not receiving an income that can sustain in any way a lifestyle, yeah.
I know you're not a massive fan of heartless capitalism, as I just read in 308 pages of the book. However, private companies create most of the jobs that most Americans have. So what do we do about that?
Well, I would argue that there are different types of capitalism. So I grew up in a farm town in upstate New York, and I saw the penny capitalism of farmers. Farmers brought their produce in for sale. You had regional capitalism, so a local factory owner who lived in the community, sat on the school board, paid taxes. And then you have corporate capitalism, which is another animal altogether. So when you talk about producing jobs, let's look at Apple. Farmers brought their produce in for sale. You had regional capitalism, so a local factory owner who lived in the community, sat on the school board, paid taxes. And then you have corporate capitalism, which is another animal altogether. So when you talk about producing jobs, let's look at Apple. Where are the manufacturing jobs for Apple?
Overseas.
They're in China.
Yeah.
And what are the working conditions for the people they're subcontractors who make Apple products?
Not great.
It's kind of slave labor. It's huge suicide rates, wage theft. When they don't make quotas, they're not paid. People climbing up on, they're living in these horrific dormitories. So corporate capitalism is an enemy of penny and regional capitalism. And it is global. It's supranational. It has no loyalty to the nation state. And it is corporate capitalism that has distorted and kind of hollowed the American economy out from the inside.
When I read your book, I see an America at war with itself between white supremacists and neo-Nazis who are trying to make their claim for the end of the world. I see you describe widespread sexual abuse in a hardcore poor industry that is completely frightening.
Utah. I wrote my gambling chapter out of the Trump Taj Mahal before Trump ever even announced he was running for president.
It's in Atlantic City.
In Atlantic City. It's now closed. When I was writing, it was in deep decay. I mean, most of the rooms were mothballed.
Rats.
There was mice all,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, the mice were fighting on the floor and the kind of stuff. People shooting up in the elevators. So I think what was so disturbing for me writing the book was how many people have been affected, especially in the opioid crisis. I don't think the numbers begin to reflect the numbers of people who are addicted to powerful narcotics, depressants. I mean, I list statistically, we're talking about big numbers, large sectors of the American populace that in essence has found ways to check out. The proliferation of hate groups is, I used for the book Emil Durkheim's great study of suicide, where he went back and tried to look, the sociologist, at what were the factors or causes that led people to kill themselves. And he coins this term anomie. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, is explain that anomie that has gripped, I would argue, at least half the country, and the dark pathologies that anomie produces. And that fundamentally, if we don't address that alienation, that dislocation, and that despair, if we don't reintegrate these people economically, politically, and socially back into a system that no longer responds in any way to their rights and their grievances, then these pathologies will only grow. And we spoke earlier about the decline of American empire. As the pressure becomes worse, as the economic situation deteriorates, if these conditions go unaddressed, then these pathologies will explode. And I covered the war in the former Yugoslavia. So I know what disintegrating societies that resort to violence can look like. I watched as, after the economic collapse of Yugoslavia in the late 1980s, from a failed, self-identified liberal elite that couldn't respond, I watched these political distortions like Radovan Karadzic and Franjo Tudjman and Slobodan Milosevic, essentially be vomited up out of the decay in the way that Trump has been vomited up out of a very diseased country.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you. Is how much of what you're describing here is a feature of the person who happens to sit in the Oval Office today versus if anybody else were in that chair?
I think Trump is the symptom, not the disease. He's a con artist. He's a demagogue, and he was astute enough to tap into the zeitgeist. The tragedy for me, there were insurgencies in both of the major political parties, Bernie Sanders and the Democrat, and the Democratic Party establishment was just more astute in terms of blocking the nomination to Sanders, and I would argue that they effectively blocked it. The Republican Party establishment was not able to block Trump, and if Sanders had gotten the nomination, I think he would have beaten Trump.
How would America be different if that had happened?
Not terribly, because with a Republican-controlled Congress, it would have been paralysis. But you wouldn't have Sanders pushing forth the kinds of agendas, nor making the kinds of appointments to the EPA, to education, Supreme Court that Trump has made.
What is danger we face comes from the marginalization and destruction of institutions, including the courts, academia, legislative bodies, cultural organizations, and the press that once ensured that civil discourse was rooted in reality and fact, helped us distinguish lies from truth, and facilitated justice. I saw a poll recently, I bet you saw it too, in which Republicans were surveyed, and 93% said, if Donald Trump says it, I believe it.
Yeah.
I think the same poll showed those same people saying, if someone in my family says it, only 63% of people believed it. They believe the president more than they...
When national and political discourse is no longer rooted in verifiable fact, then facts are interchangeable with opinions. Truth is whatever you want it to be. And I write in the book about the nature of the permanent lie, that all politicians lie, all governments lie, as I.F. Stone said. But they lie for expediency. So, for instance, Bill Clinton argues that by passing NAFTA, there will be many more American good jobs. Bill Clinton doesn't make that argument anymore because it's false, and who knows whether he knew or didn't know, but it's false. The press, that their job is to make sure that people speak about a verifiable reality. Those institutions have become corrupted, weakened, destroyed, or replaced with systems Fox, Breitbart, all of these